Hello. It's late in the evening for me to be reading, so I'm not really expecting anybody to join me, but I keep meaning to read and I keep having life interfere. You ever have that with homework? You know you've got stuff to do, but just getting to it by the time you've finished all the things that you had to do to take care of your family, to sports, activities, to get to the homework just seems to take forever. So that's kind of my life too. I wanted to show you and shout out and thank Dinah. This is this precious little ornament. And the company, oh, where are my glasses? The company is Willow Tree. Put that there. Love of learning, open books, open minds. And I love that. She's a little sweet angel reading her book, and she's just clutching it to her because she loves reading. And I love the idea of open books, open minds. And I just really want to be appreciative. Dinah has been supportive in so many ways. And this gift is just unexpected and treasured. So, hey, my day has been good. I just was visiting with friends and I was just love it. I love the feel of her. Hand painted. And then she hand carves the little ornaments, but then they're cast. So I just think she's so sweet. Sarah, hey, how are y'all doing? It has been a while. I don't read often enough. I need to do a better job so that we can get through our book, which still has quite a way. We still haven't gotten to book 3 yet. And are there 4 books or just 3 books? I'm looking now. Chapter 9, chapter 4. I think it's just 3 books. We're close to finishing book 2. And then after that, we have this much more to read. And the new school year is starting. I read this all through summer. Like, it's taken me forever to read this. Hazel, it was really thoughtful. And I want to sound appreciative. I hope Donna comes on. And if she does, I'm going to hold my little cute reading girl up to thank her, because I want to be a person who is appreciative of when people take time to do loving things and kind things. So we are on A Tale of Two Cities, chapter 22, The Sea Still Rises. Haggard Saint Antoine had had only one exultant week in which to soften his modicum of hard and bitter bread to such extent as he could, with the relish of fraternal embraces and congratulations when Madame Defarge sat at her counter as usual, presiding over the customers. I always like to see how long the chapter is. Okay. Madame Defarge wore no rose in her head, for the great brotherhood of spies had become, even in one short week, extremely chary of trusting themselves. Interesting word. I want to see what chary, not a word I know. Let's see if I can guess it contextually. Extremely chary of trust, like wary is what I think it means. Wary of trusting in themselves to the saints' mercies. Let's see if I have the right definition. Cautiously or suspiciously reluctant to do something. So yeah, I used a context to figure it out, and we were right. So that's how we increase our vocabulary, if we remember it. Hi, Queen. I love you. Hi, Gina. I love you back. I'm surprised there are people even taking time to come on, because I'm reading pretty late for me. Bedtime for the old lady. So they were chary of, interesting word, I'd never heard it, of trusting themselves to the saints' mercies. The lamps across the streets had a pretentiously elastic swing with them. Pretentious. To be pretentious is to have like this kind of importance, but seriousness to it, and a little bit of a warning. Madame Defarge, with her arms folded, sat in the morning light and heat, contemplating the wine shop and the street. In both, there were several knots of loungers, squalid and miserable, but now with a manifest sense of power enthroned on their distress. The raggedest nightcap, awry in the wretchedest head, had crooked significance in it. I know how hard it has grown for me, the wearer of this, to support life in myself. But do you know how easy it has grown for me, the wearer of this, to destroy life in you? Every lean, bare arm that had been without work before had this work always ready for it now that it could strike. The fingers of the knitting women were vicious, with the experience that they could tear. There was a change in the appearance of Saint Antoine. The image had been hammering into this for hundreds of years, and the last finishing blows had told mightily on the expression. So Dickens continues to use inanimate object statues as mood setters to kind of give us, like when he talked about the stone faces of the gargoyles at the Marquis' palace, he was talking about the hardness and the nobility's unwillingness to change. And now he's talking about Saint Antoine, the patron saint of the community, and how he's got a changed look and it's kind of menacing. So the innocent people of the community, the women, the wives, the knitters, they have become menacing and vengeful and very, very different, very aggressive. Madame Defarge sat observing it with such suppressed approval as was to be desired in the leader of the Saint Antoine women. One of her sisterhood knitted beside her. The short, rather plump wife of a starved grocer and the mother of 2 children withal, this lieutenant had already earned the complimentary name of the Vengeance. So there we are. They're angry women. Their children have been starved and they want revenge. Hark, said the Vengeance. Listen then, who comes? As if a train of powder laid from the outermost bound of the Saint Antoine quarter to the wine shop door had been suddenly fired, a fast spreading murmur came rushing along. It's Defarge, said Madame. Silence, patriots. Defarge came in breathless, pulled off a red cap he wore, and looked round him. Listen everywhere, said Madame again. Listen to him. Defarge stood, panting against a backdrop of eager eyes and open mouths, formed outside the door. All those within the wine shop had sprung to their feet. Say then, my husband, what is it? News from the other world. How then, cried Madame contemptuously, the other world? Does everybody here recall old Foulon, who told the famished people that they might eat grass and who died and went to hell? Everybody, from all the throats. The news is of him. He is among us. Among us, from the universal throat again. And dead? Not dead. He feared us so much, and with reason, that he caused himself to be represented as dead and had a grand mock funeral. But they have found him alive, hiding in the country, and have brought him in. I have seen him but now on his way to the Hôtel de Ville, a prisoner. I have said that he had reason to fear us, say all. Had he reason? So he's saying that this person that was an enemy to the common folk, to the Jacques, had staged his death. So everybody thought he was dead so he could be safe from the unruly mob. Because remember, the storming of the Bastille was so aggressive. And they now have found him alive, captured him, and have taken him to prison. And Defarge is saying, I myself saw that. I'm certain of it. Wretched old sinner of more than 80 years and 10, if he had never known it yet, he would have done it. He would have known it in his heart of hearts if he had heard the answering cry. A moment of profound silence followed. Defarge and his wife looked steadfastly at one another. The Vengeance stooped, and the jar of a drum was heard as she moved it at her feet behind the counter. Patriot, said Defarge in a determined voice, are we ready? Instantly, Madame Defarge's knife was in her girdle. The drum was beating in the streets as if it and a drummer had flown together by magic, and the Vengeance, using terrific shrieks and flinging her arms about her head like all the 40 Furies at once, was tearing from house to house, rousing the women. The men were terrible. In the bloody-minded anger with which they looked from windows, caught up what arms they had, and came pouring down into the streets. But the women were a sight to chill the boldest. From such household occupation as their bare poverty yielded, from their children, from their aged and their sick, crouching on the bare ground, famished, naked, they ran out with streaming hair, urging one another and themselves to madness with the wildest cries and actions. I'm just peeking to see who's out there. Hello, I see you. Villain Foulon taken, my sister. Old Foulon taken, my mother. Miscreant Foulon taken, my daughter. Then a score of others ran into the midst of these, beating their breasts, tearing their hair, and screaming, Foulon alive? So they're like losing. They're crazy. They're angry. They want revenge. Foulon, who told my old father that he might eat grass when I had no bread to give him. Foulon, who told my baby it might suck grass when these breasts were dry with want. Oh, Mother of God, this Foulon. Oh, heaven, our suffering. Hear me, my dead baby and my withered father. I swear on my knees on these stones to avenge you on Foulon. Husbands and brothers and young men, give us the blood of Foulon. Give us the head of Foulon. Give us the heart of Foulon. Give us the body and soul of Foulon. Rend Foulon to pieces. Tear him apart. And dig him into the ground that grass may grow from him. With these cries, numbers of the women, lashed into blind frenzy, whirled about, striking and tearing at their own friends until they dropped into a passionate swoon and were only saved by the men belonging to them from being trampled underfoot. Karen Bacarisis, the fairy book collection edited by Oh, I know who you are, Karen. You're the one who comes on and says names of books and authors, but never comment. So, you know what happens. Hey, Kelly. Nevertheless, not a moment was lost, not a moment. This Foulon was at the Hotel de Ville and might be loosed. Never, if Saint Antoine knew his own sufferings, insults, and wrongs. Armed men and women flocked out of the quarter so fast and drew even these last dregs after them with such a force of suction that within a quarter of an hour there was not a human creature in Saint Antoine's bosom but a few old crones and the wailing children. No, they were all by that time choking the hall of examination where this old man, ugly and wicked, was, and overflowing into the adjacent open space and streets. The Defarges, husband and wife, the Vengeance, and Jacques III were in the first press, like the first group, and at no great distance from him in the hall. Hey, Rendell, Katam. Thank you. I'm glad you joined me for a live read. I rarely read this late. Like, this is really late for me. So I stayed up late. I came in late. I was out. And I thought, let me get another chapter in. So I get to see some people I'm not used to. I'm glad you're here. So this is this Foulon. And I'm curious. I'm going to stop and see if he's a real character or just created from Dickens. Foulon. French. Yeah, Revolution. Joseph Foulon de Douai, French politician. Was a French politician and controller general of finances under Louis XVI, deeply unpopular figure. He was the ignominious distinction of being the first recorded person to have been lynched à la lanterne. So we know what's going to happen to him. So he is a real character. That I always think it's fun to stop and see how the history is in these books. Oh, I've lost the back page of my book. See, cried Madame, pointing with her knife. See the old villain bound with ropes. That was well done to tie a bunch of grass up upon his back. Ha ha, that was well done. Let him eat it now. Madame put her knife under her arm and clapped her hands as at a play. The people immediately behind Madame Defarge, explaining the cause of her satisfaction to those behind them, and those again explaining to others, and those to others. The neighboring streets resounded with the clapping of hands. Similarly, during 2 or 3 hours of drawl and the winnowing of many bushels of words, Madame Defarge's frequent expressions of impatience were taken up with a marvelous quickness at a distance, the more readily because certain men who had by some wonderful exercise of agility climbed up the external architecture to look in from the windows, knew Madame Defarge well and acted as a telegraph between her and the crowd outside the building. At length, the sun rose so high that it stuck a kindly ray as of hope or protection directly down upon the old prisoner's head. The favor was too much to bear. In an instant, the barrier of dust and chaff that had stood surprisingly long went to the winds, and Saint Antoine got him. It was known directly to the furthest confines of the crowd. Defarge had but sprung over a railing and a table and folded the miserable wretch in a deadly embrace. Madame Defarge had but followed and turned her hand in one of the ropes with which he was tied. The Vengeance and Jacques Three were not yet up with them, and the men at the windows had not yet swooped into the hall, like birds of prey from their high perches, when the cry seemed to go up all over the city, "Bring him out! Bring him to the lamp!" Chaffardos. I don't know how to say that. It's like shadow. Oh, it's like an A, shadows. I got it. Love your vids. They helped a lot. Just finished a separate piece. Kelly, thank you for asking that question. I really always am curious to know and I don't know what age person you are. Are you high school? I'm curious to know, because it's still a book that's read. It's still a book that I have very mixed feelings about. I like the story. I like the storytelling, but it's a little tedious sometimes to read. So, Kelly, I'm glad you asked that question. Shadows, what do you think? Did you like it? Down and up and head foremost on the steps of the building, now on his knees, now on his feet, now on his back, dragged and struck at and stifled by the bunches of grass and straw that were thrust into his face by hundreds of hands, torn, bruised, panting, bleeding, yet always entreating and beseeching for mercy, now full of vehement agony of action, with a small clear space about him as the people drew one another back that they might see, now a log of dead wood drawn through a forest of legs. He was hauled to the nearest street corner where one of the fatal lamps swung, and there Madame Defarge let him go, as a cat might have done to a mouse, and silently and composedly looked at him while they made ready and while he besought her, begged her. The women passionately screeching at him all the time, and the men sternly calling out to him, killed with grass in his mouth. Once he went aloft, and the rope broke, and they caught him shrieking. Then the rope was merciful and held him, and his head was soon upon a pike, with grass enough in the mouth for all Saint Antoine to dance at the sight of it. So you can imagine the hatred that they had, that they would torment him in such a way that they would become so inhumane because they blamed him. He took the brunt of all the suffering that the community had been through. Nor was this the end of the day's bad work, for Saint Antoine so shouted and danced his angry blood up that it boiled again on hearing, when the day closed in, that the son-in-law of the dispatched, another of the people's enemies and insulters, was coming into Paris under a guard 500 strong in cavalry alone. Saint Antoine wrote his crimes on flaring sheets of paper, seized him, would have torn him out of the breast of an army to bear Foulon company, set his head and heart on pikes, and carried the 3 spoils of the day in wolf procession through the streets. Sid, I haven't heard from you in such a long time. I hope you're having a great summer. Not before dark did the men and women come back to the children wailing and breadless. Then the miserable bakers' shops were beset by long files of them, patiently waiting to buy bad bread. And while they waited with stomachs faint and empty, they beguiled the time by embracing one another on the triumphs of the day and achieving them again in gossip. Gradually, these strings of ragged people shortened and frayed away, and then poor lights began to shine in high windows, and slender fires were made in the streets, at which neighbors cooked in common, afterwards supping at their doors. Scanty and insufficient suppers those, and innocent of meat, as of most other sauce to wretched bread. Yet human fellowship infused some nourishment into the flinty viands, and struck some sparks of cheerfulness out of them. Fathers and mothers who had had their full share in the worst of the day played gently with their meager children, and lovers, with such a world around them and before them, loved and hoped. It was almost morning when Defarge's wine shop parted with its last knot of customers, and Monsieur Defarge said to Madame, his wife, in husky tones while fastening the door, "At last, it has come, my dear." They've been waiting for their vengeance to be lashed out on the nobility, and now it has come. School's starting next week for so many. Sid, is this your senior year? How exciting. And are y'all in person or are you going to do virtual? Eh well, returned Madame. Almost. Saint Antoine slept. The Devarges slept. Even the Vengeance slept with her starved grocer, and the drum was at rest. The drum was the only voice in Saint Antoine that blood and hurry had not changed. The Vengeance, as custodian of the drum, could have wakened him up and had the same speech out of him as before the Bastille fell or old Foulon was seized. Not so with speaking of horse tones, of the men and women in Saint Antoine's bosom. I want to see how long. Chapter 23 is too long for me to read. I was going to say if it's short, then I'll go ahead and read another. But well, that's only 20 minutes. Let's do it because I just want to get the book done. Ready for college, a whole new world. I think senior year. Okay. Prism. Hello. Thanks so much for reading. And then there were none. I was reading this year for summer project this year from Florida. Hey, Fareed. Well, good luck to you, Prism. So much going on in Florida. And then there were none is a fun one to read. I enjoy that. Luke, you're a new name to me. Hi. I'm telling you, this time of night brings new people. Okay, quick break and back to chapter 23. Fire rises. Let's see where we are. We're still in France. There was a change in the village where the fountain fell and where the mender of roads went forth daily to hammer out the stones on the highway, such morsels of bread as might serve for patches to hold his poor ignorant soul and his poor reduced body together. The prison on the crag was not so dominant as of yore, as of before. There were soldiers to guard it, but not many. There were officers to guard the soldiers, but not one of them knew what his men would do beyond this, that it would probably not be what he was ordered. Far and wide lay a ruined country, yielding nothing but desolation. Every green leaf, every blade of grass and blade of grain was as shriveled and poor as the miserable people. Everything was bowed down, dejected, oppressed, and broken. Habitations, fenced, domesticated animals, men, women, children, and the soil that bore them, all worn out. I'm just beginning chapter 23, Fareed. I finished 22. Monseigneur, almost a most worthy individual gentleman, often a most worthy individual gentleman, was a national blessing, gave a chivalrous tone to things, was a polite example of luxurious and shining life, and a great deal more to equal purpose. Nevertheless, Monseigneur, as a class, had somehow or other brought things to this. Strange that creation, designed especially for Monseigneur, should be so soon wrung dry and squeezed out. There must be something short-sighted in the eternal arrangements, surely. Thus it was, however, and the last drop of blood having been extracted from the flints, and the last screw of the rack having been turned so often that its perches crumbled, and it now turned and turned with nothing to bite, Monseigneur began to run away from a phenomenon so low and unaccountable. But this was not the change on the village, and on many a village like it. For scores of years gone by, Monseigneur had squeezed it and wrung it, and had seldom graced it with his presence, except for the pleasures of the chase, now found in hunting the people, now found in hunting the beast. For those preservation, Monseigneur made edifying spaces of barbarous and barren wilderness. No, the change consisted in the appearance of strange faces of low caste, rather than the disappearance of the high caste, chiseled, and otherwise beautified and beautifying features of Monseigneur. Prison, that's an interesting, he said, I must mention when I'm reading, and then there were none, that we only had 300 subscribers, and now we're at 12,700. I didn't know we were at 12,700. I'm so excited about that. I don't teach in the classroom anymore. That's changed since when I was first started reading. I work for education, the Department of Education now. And Sid, it was nice to hear from you too. I'm so glad you popped in. So it's really nice to know that I'm still teaching, if you will, that this is still helping students. It makes me super, super happy. And I can't imagine that we have 12,000. I mean, I know in the world of YouTubers, that's not that many people, but considering I'm reading classic novels, I'm super excited about that. And I love when you guys pop in and let me know how it's grown. I'm not remembering. I mean, I thought Monsignor was the one who was already killed. So I don't understand who we're talking about right now. Let me look in the back and see if I can get any like direction. Nope, it's not there. Page 207. Okay, so it's this section. Let's see if it gives us any context. Why does the mob kill Foulon? What happens to the Chateau of the Marquis? Okay, that's what we're doing right now. I guess they're just out of like sequence. So we know he's killed, but I guess they're referencing to when he was the Marquis or the Monsignor. Yeah, because that's who he is, who I think he is. I just know he's already dead, so it's confusing. Luke says, in a lesson before dying. That's a story I really loved. Prism says she was binge watching videos so that he could find a book. And I saw you go live, so I subscribed. Oh, good. And waited for you to go live to say thanks. That's so thoughtful of you. Now get back to studying so you're ready for school. No chatting. Get to reading. So I think they're still talking about that, Monsignor. For in those times, as the mender of roads worked solitary in the dust, not often troubling himself to reflect the dust he was, and to dust he must return, being for the most part too much occupied in thinking how little he had for supper and how much more he had to eat if he had it, in these times, as he raised his eyes from his lonely labor and viewed the prospect, he would see some rough figure approaching on foot, the like of which was a rarity in those parts, but was now a frequent presence. As it advanced, the mender of roads would discern without surprise that it was a shaggy-haired man of almost barbarian aspect, tall, in wooden shoes that were clumsy even to the eyes of a mender of roads, grim, rough, swart, steeped in the mud and dust of many highways, dank with the marshy moisture of many low grounds, sprinkled with the thorns and leaves and moss of many byways through woods. Such a man came upon him like a ghost at noon in the July weather, as he sat on his heap of stones under a bank, taking such shelter as he could get from a shower of hail. The man looked at him, looked at the village in the hollow, at the mill, and at the prison on the crag. When he had identified these objects in that benighted mind he said in a dialect that was just intelligible, "How goes it, Jacques?" "All well, Jacques." "Touch, then." They joined hands, and the man sat down on the heap of stones. "No dinner?" "Nothing but supper now," said the mender of roads, with a hungry face. "It is the fashion," growled the man. "I meet no dinner anywhere." He took out a blackened pipe, filled it, lighted it with flint and steel, pulled at it until it was a bright glow, then suddenly held it from him and dropped something into it from between his finger and thumb that blazed and went out in a puff of smoke. "Touch, then." It was the turn of the mender of roads to say at this time, after observing these operations. They again joined hands. "Tonight?" said the mender of roads. "Tonight," said the man, putting the pipe in his mouth. "Where?" "Here." He and the mender of roads sat on the heap of stones, looking slightly at one another, with the hail driving in between them, like a pygmy charge of bayonets, until the sky began to clear over the village. "Show me," said the traveler then, moving to the brow of the hill. "See," returned the mender of roads with extended finger. "You go down here and straight through the street and past the fountain." "To the devil with all that," interrupted the other, rolling his eyes over the landscape. "I go through no streets and past no fountains." Well, about 2 leagues beyond the summit of that hill above the village." "Good. When do you cease to work?" At sunset." "Bye, Prism." "Will you wake me before departing? I have walked 2 nights without resting. Let me finish my pipe, and I shall sleep like a child. Will you wake me?" "Surely." The wayfarer smoked his pipe out, put it in his breast, slipped off his great wooden shoes, and lay down on his back on the heap of stones. He was fast asleep directly. So what do we know about this stranger? He's hungry, he's menacing a little bit, and he's really exhausted. I mean, for him to fall asleep that quick. Assalamu alaikum. Labez. What a surprise. Where was I? As the road mender plied his dusty labor, and the hail clouds rolling away revealed bright bars and streaks of sky, which were responded to by silver gleams upon the landscape, the little man, who wore a red cap now in place of his blue one, seemed fascinated by the figure on the heap of stones. His eyes were so often turned towards it that he used his tools mechanically, and one would have said to very poor account. The bronze face, the shaggy black hair and beard, the coarse woolen red cap, the red medley dress of homespun stuff and hairy skins of beasts, the powerful frame attenuated by spare living, and the sullen and desperate compression of the lips in sleep inspired the mender of roads with awe. I'm trying to see how much, we still have several pages to go. It is nice, well, I don't see you, but it is nice to be seen. The traveler had traveled far, and his feet were footsore, and his ankles chafed and bleeding. His great shoes, stuffed with leaves and grass, had been heavy to drag over the many long leagues, and his clothes were chafed into holes, as he himself was into sores. Stooping down beside him, the road mender tried to get a peep at secret weapons in his breast or where not, but in vain, for he slept with his arms crossed upon him, and said as resolutely as his lips, "Fortified towns with their stockades, guardhouses, gates, trenches, and drawbridges seemed, to the mender of roads, to be so much air as against his figure." And when he lifted his eyes from it to the horizon and looked around, he saw in his small, fancy, similar figures, stopped by no obstacle, tending to centers all over France. The man slept on, indifferent to the showers of hail and intervals of brightness, to sunshine on his face and shadow, to the pattering lumps of dull ice on his body and the diamonds into which the sun changed them, until the sun was low in the west and the sky was glowing. Then the mender of roads, having got his tools together and all things ready to go down into the village, roused him. "Good," said the sleeper, rising on his elbow. 2 leagues beyond the summit of the hill? About. Good." The mender of roads went home with the dust going on before him, according to the set of the wind, and was soon at the fountain, squeezing himself in among the lean kine brought there to drink, and appearing even to whisper to them in his whispering to all the village. When the village had taken its poor supper, it did not creep to bed as it usually did, but came out of doors again and remained there. A curious contagion of whispering was upon it, and also when it gathered together at the fountain in the dark, another curious contagion of looking expectantly at the sky in one direction only. Monsieur Gabelle, chief functionary of the place, became uneasy, went out on his housetop alone, and looked in his direction too, glanced down from behind his chimneys at the darkening faces by the fountain below, and sent word to the sacristan, who kept the keys of the church, that there might be a need to ring the tocsin by and by. The night deepened. The trees environing the old chateau, keeping its solitary state apart, moved in a rising wind as though they threatened the pile of building massive and dark in the gloom. Up the 2 terrace flights of steps the rain ran wildly and beat at the great door like a swift messenger, rousing those within. Uneasy rushes of wind went through the hall, among the old spears and knives, and passed lamenting up the stairs, and shook the curtains of the bed where the last Marquis had slept. East, west, north, and south, through the woods, 4 heavy-treading, unkempt figures crushed the high grass and cracked the branches, striding on cautiously to come together in the courtyard. 4 lights broke out there and moved away in different directions, and all was black again. So we've got these spies that are loose, and we're not sure what they're doing, but they've got some kind of plot ahead, and they're meeting up at the Marquis' property. But not for long. Presently the chateau began to make itself strangely visible by some light of its own, as though, fire rises. Well, there's our hint from the chapter. Fire rises is the chapter title, and they're setting the Marquis' house on fire. Then a flickering streak played behind the architecture of the front, picking out transparent places and showing where balustrades, arches, and windows were. Then it soared higher and grew broader and brighter. Soon, from a score of the great windows, flames burst forth, and the stone faces awakened, stared out of fire. Remember, the stone faces awakened. Remember, that's personification. So if you're an AP student or you've got a teacher asking you to look for literary devices, then the stones, as I mentioned earlier, the faces of the gargoyles on the building, they come alive almost as the fire is burning them. A faint murmur arose about the house from the few people who were left there, and there was a saddling of a horse and riding away. There was spurring and splashing through the darkness, and bridle was drawn in the space by the village fountain, and the horse in the foam stood at Monsieur Gabel's door. "Help, Gabel! Help, everyone!" The tocsin rang impatiently, but other help, if that were any, there was none. The mender of roads and 250 particular friends stood with folded arms at the fountain, looking at the pillar of fire in the sky. "It must be 40 feet high," said they grimly, and never moved. So they're not going to do anything to put the fire out because, one, they said it, but now that all the community's out, and again, they're getting their vengeance on the nobility that treated them so badly, that let their children die, that didn't feed them, that didn't help them. Now they're returning the help they never had as well. The rider from the chateau and the horse in a foam clattered away through the village and galloped up the stony steep to the prison on the crag. At the gate, a group of officers were looking at the fire. Removed from them, a group of soldiers. "Help, gentlemen officers. The chateau is on fire. Valuable objects may be saved from the flames by timely aid. Help, help." The officers looked toward the soldiers, who looked at the fire, gave no orders, and answered with shrugs and biting of lips, "It must burn." As the rider rattled down the hill again and through the street, the village was illuminating. The mender lit up. The mender of roads and the 250 particular friends, inspired as one man and woman by the idea of lighting up, had darted into their houses and were putting candles in every dull little pane of glass. The general scarcity of everything occasioned candles to be borrowed in a rather peremptory manner of Monsieur Gabel, and in a moment of reluctance and hesitation on that functionary's part, the mender of roads, once so submissive to authority, had remarked that carriages were good to make bonfires with, and that post horses would roast. Oh, that's terrible. Jacobian, Ani Jacobian, hello, thank you. That's so sweet of you to say. Jade, I know I have a good voice to put you to sleep. So if you aren't listening to this for school, just snuggle in, turn off the lights, and I will read soothingly to you so you can de-stress from the day and drift off to sleep. I'm like what is it called? ASMR, ASRM, ASRA. Oh, I'm so crazy. I don't remember the name of it. I listen to it where she does her nails and makes the sounds kind of thing. The chateau burned. The nearest trees laid hold of. I don't like that they burned the horses. I don't know what to say back to you're welcome. You're welcome that I'm welcome. Thank you. The chateau burned, the nearest trees laid hold of by the fire, scorched and shriveled, trees at a distance, fired by the four fierce figures, begirt the blazing edifice with a new forest of smoke. Molten lead and iron boiled in the marble basin of the fountain. The water ran dry. The extinguisher tops of the towers vanished like ice before the heat and trickled down into four rugged wells of flame. Great rents and splits branched out in the solid walls like crystallization. Stupefied birds wheeled about and dropped into the furnace. Four fierce figures trudged away, east, west, north, and south, the ones that came and set the fire, along the night-enshrouded roads, guided by the beacon they had lighted, towards their next destination. The illuminated village had seized hold of the tocsin and, abolishing the lawful ringer, rang for joy. Not only that, but the village, lightheaded with famine, fire, and bell ringing, and bethinking itself that Monsieur Gabel had to do with the collection of rent and taxes, though it was but a small installment of taxes and no rent at all, that Gabel had got in those latter days, became impatient for an interview with him, and surrounding his house, summoned him to come forth for personal conference. So they want to get this Monsieur Gabel who they saw as part of the tax collecting system. So he was wrong too. Adley Smith says, finished watching 1,000 Splendid Suns. One of my favorites. You're helpful. And oh, thank you. That's so nice of you to say. I really appreciate when you guys read and come and tell me that it was helpful, because it encourages me to keep doing it. Whereupon Monsieur Gabelle did heavily bar his door and retire to hold counsel with himself, like he's going to figure out what he needs to do. The result of that conference was that Gabelle again withdrew himself to his housetop behind his stack of chimneys, this time resolved, if his door was broken in, he was a small Southern man of retaliative temperament, to pitch himself head foremost over the parapet and crush a man or two below. So if you're coming to kill me and you make it in the house, I'm going to throw myself off the roof and hopefully kill a few of you as I fall and crush you. You know, if I'm going to die, I'm going to take some people with me. Probably Monsieur Gabelle passed a long night up there with the distant chateau for fire and candle, and the beating at his door combined with the joy ringing for music, not to mention his having an ill-omened lamp slung across the road before his posting house gate, which the village showed a lively inclination to displace in his favor, a trying suspense to be passing a whole summer night on the brink of the Black Ocean, ready to take that plunge into it upon Monsieur Gabelle had resolved. But the friendly dawn appearing at last, and the rush candles of the village guttering out, the people happily dispersed, and Monsieur Gabelle came down, bringing his life with him for that while. Within 100 miles, and in the light of other fires, there are other functionaries less fortunate that night and other nights, whom the rising sun found hanging across other peaceful streets, once peaceful streets. So this wasn't the only isolated incident. This is happening all throughout France. Where they had been born and bred also, there were other villages and townspeople less fortunate than the mender of roads and his fellows, upon whom the functionaries and soldiery turned with success, and whom they strung up in their turn. So those that were starting the fires, some of them got caught, not the group that we knew, but others, and they were hung by the soldiers. But the fierce figures were steadily wending east, west, north, and south. Be that as it would, whosoever hung, fire burned. The altitude of the gallows that would turn to water and quench it, no functionary by any stretch of mathematics was able to calculate successfully. So we got 2 chapters in. How many more in book 3? Let's see. Until book 3. We only have 20. We have 24 to read, and that's it. It's a long chapter though, so it'll be a whole session. But 24 is the last in book 2. Yay, we're getting close. And then how long is book 3? It's not terrible. You know, it'll probably be Christmas by the time I get this done at the pace I've been going. But I'm trying to do better. So be patient with me. It just takes me now that I don't teach, it's hard for me to find the time to do it. Paco, it's been a while. And Then There Were None read aloud was great. Thank you. Read along, not read aloud. Sorry, I read that wrong. And Then There Were None. It's still read. And I've got to get my 1984 book ordered, because when I do finally finish this, I am going to read 1984. There's so many I still want to read. And one last time, Dinah, I know eventually you'll see this. Isn't it so cute? My little thank you. I want to be appreciative. One of my readers sent this to me. The company is Willow Tree. They're all hand carved out and then hand painted. And I love what it says: open books, open minds. So you guys open your minds by opening these books and reading along with me. If you haven't subscribed, as you know, I love to do a count. And I just found out tonight on this read that we're at 12,700. So, and I also was told by a family member that I have 2 million views. Oh, that's crazy to me. 2 million. I'm so glad to know people are out there reading. I mean, of course, that means some people just pop in and pop out, but 2 million, that's a heck of a lot to me. I can't even fathom that. I would have, in all my years of teaching, not even gotten to probably 1,000 students that I taught. So to know that that kind of education is happening, that many people are trying to read and trying to do well in school, it's super, super, I'm corny and happy about that. All right, well, it is way past this chick's bedtime, so I got to get these glasses off and snuggle up, and I'll go listen to my YouTubers, and they'll put me to sleep. If you haven't subscribed, you know how to do it. If you send me a message, I don't know, it's rare that I don't return the message. If the only reason I don't return a message, either it was rude or I didn't see it. So just be persistent. You can reach me at Instagram, Best Tutor Friend. You can message me here, below. I think there's a link to my email address as well. And I love to hear from you guys because it helps me know what you like and how it helps. I've tried to change, those of you that have followed along, I try not to interact with the readers as much because it's interrupting when y'all are trying to read. I try and save it for beginning and end so you can just skip it if you want. Brianna Gutierrez, hello. Thank you for reading these stories. You're welcome. I have to read a lesson before dying, which I love, and would like to thank you for helping me understand the story. Well, welcome to Louisiana too, because it's set there. That's where we are. I'm so glad to have you. I hope you have a great school year. I know a lot of y'all are scurrying to get it read before school starts, even though you had all summer, but we all procrastinate, right? It's taken me forever. I need to go back and look at the original date of when I started A Tale of Two Cities. I knew it would take me a long time to read through it, but it is good and it's worth it and we'll get there. So don't get discouraged. Don't give up. Find the tools like this that help you get through and keep reading. Subscribe, ring the bell so you know when I go on live. Reach out and send me messages. Come join our Discord and have discussion about books and school and topics. And I will read to you next time. See ya.